and welcome to the first session of, I believe, are going to be 3 sessions of local programs talking about the work that we're actually doing in building sustainable communities. I am Barbara Fields, and I am the Executive Director for Rhode Island LISC, and I am very proud to share the stage today with 4 of my colleagues. I'll introduce them briefly now, and then they'll introduce themselves more later as we go on with our story. All the way to my left is Lieutenant Dean Isabella of the Providence Police Department. To his immediate right is Frank Shea, who is the Executive Director of Onlyville Housing Corporation, and both of these partners work with us in Providence. And then on the northern reaches of our tiny state, there's a fabulous city, Woonsocket, and we are very proud today to have Jordan Dubois, who is an artist with River's Edge Art Project, which just won a national award from Michelle Obama, one of 15 in the country for innovative programs connecting young people with the arts as a career path. And then with Chief Thomas Carey, who 3 years ago relocated back to New England as Chief of Police in Woonsocket, and we were very lucky to grab him back to our region. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of LISC in Rhode Island, and then we'll hear from our panelists about more particulars on the work that we have been doing in working with police in our communities. So the Rhode Island LISC office was launched in 1991. It was the 27th LISC office, and I was about the 125th employee to come to LISC. We've grown a little in the 20 years. We launched a neighborhood development fund, which still operates and provides operating support grants to CDCs across the state. We were one of the first LISC offices to join the AmeriCorps program, and we are proudly in the 17th year of having AmeriCorps members work in communities throughout the state. And we actually hired one of them, and she's our office manager. I know she's watching today, so I'm going to give a shout out to Nati Tavares, because we're very proud of her and the work that we've been doing with her. In 2001, we launched the Rhode Island Child Care Facilities Fund, which over the course of 10 years has invested over $6 million in child care facilities across the state. In 2004, we launched our work with local police departments, known nationally as the Community Safety Initiative. And in an embarrassment of riches, 5 times in 4 years, we have won national awards from the MetLife Foundation. They made a mistake in 2009, but I'm sure they'll correct that. We will win one in 2011, but we are very, very excited to be setting a standard of working together with police departments. And in 2009, we finally cut the ribbon on our first investment through LISC's program with the National Football League. But we were yet to link all those issues, and I think you all heard Michael Rubinger talk about that. And we have called our local building sustainable communities our neighborhoods, and some of us are wearing pins. That is just the way we've branded it locally. But it was a comprehensive approach to connecting neighborhoods and the investments we've been making. So since 1991, you can see we are truly a statewide program, although we have focused on the urban core. We have invested over $280 million in Rhode Island communities and brought in nearly $1 billion of other investment from public and private resources. While we were very proud of all these investments and the work that was being done, as Michael said, we hadn't yet connected them and really seen the full advantage of putting together the pieces. So we launched our neighborhoods as a strategic initiative based on LISC's national Building Sustainable Communities. So what was this? It was a holistic approach that I called connecting the dots. By intentionally linking our programs and our investments, we could build upon anchor projects in our neighborhoods. And today you'll hear about Onlyville, which is on the west side of Providence, and 3 neighborhoods in Woonsocket, Constitution Hill, Fairmount, and the Main Street neighborhoods. We figured if we would start off anchor projects, we would already have a stake in the ground in which we could bring together people and expand on that work. These 2 communities are representative of the types of communities we work with across the state, but the partnerships we felt we could build on ranged from working with Youth Build to the local police departments to youth groups in these neighborhoods and housing organizations. Here's a list of the different types of organizations and relationships that we were trying to build. And yes, that is our own Lieutenant Dean Isabella there up on the screen with Bill Bratton, who was the former police chief in New York, Boston, and LA. And in the bottom is a youth group of young people up in Woonsocket who we brought together. So we really are going to highlight today, even though we've reached out and dealt with the schools and community health centers, our work particularly with arts organizations and the local police departments. A year ago yesterday, we had nearly 250 people gather in downtown Providence to roll out the community contracts or the quality of life plans in these two neighborhoods. And we were joined by Senator Reed, who will be honored tomorrow night at the gala, because he's been with us since day one and really understood that as we were adding programs, it wasn't some random approach, but really an attempt to connect these. And what was most satisfying, I think, for many of us was that young people in both of our communities were excited to see their names in print in these contracts, and they celebrated these events with the local police departments. So first we're going to look at Woonsocket. At the end of this presentation, you're going to have to see if you can pronounce a number of the names that come up in this presentation. And we're going to start with Woonsocket. It's historically one of the oldest communities in the country that was built along the Blackstone River and was the heartland of the textile industry. As I mentioned, we focused on 3 neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are relatively small, and both of our communities are 10,000 people. I think in Olneyville it's a little bit less, the population. But these are neighborhoods with high needs. In Woonsocket, 50% of the population is under the age of 18. So what were we going to do to reach out to young people? And seen pictured here on the bottom is the first, or I think it was the second mural that Jordan worked on in the community. And this one is right across from City Hall, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that when he speaks. What these maps show are the variety of investments that were being made by LISC and all of our partners, and how they were really trying to stay focused and targeted and not spread throughout the city, but all along the river here, which is the Blackstone River. But we have had investments in arts and culture, in housing, in health centers, and I think they've all kind of built upon each other and tried to leverage what we started with. So a little bit, the CDC there is called NeighborWorks Blackstone River Valley. Here's one of their investments. This was an abandoned school that literally and figuratively sits on a hill in the middle of a neighborhood that had had all the housing redeveloped. Today, it is a child care center hosting, I think, somewhere close to 250 young people. And we had the pleasure of opening this a few years ago, and it still continues to be a vibrant center for young people. This is an abandoned site. It was a 4-acre site. It was an abandoned hardware store. And typical Rhode Island speak, it used to be. Today it is 43 apartments with ground floor retail. And what isn't in this photo, but off to the right, and I think probably a first in LISC's portfolio, there is a drive-through Dunkin' Donuts on the site. And there are 3 apartments above it, and as the former lieutenant governor said, that would solve our affordable housing problem if we could put 3 apartments on top of every Dunkin' Donuts. Of course, I responded that would then be our Eat Smart, Move More program. So now I am going to show you a short video, and then we're going to ask Jordan and the chief to speak about the work in Woonsocket.
Parents have a belief in our community, a shared belief with the school and people at the schools that we can make this community a better place. We can work with our community partners to make our schools or to transform our schools into being able to give the highest quality education to the students in our community.
Woonsocket is unique because we have different art programs that keep us out of trouble.
The streets are a lot safer, they're cleaner. I really don't see a lot of gang activity as much as it has in the past couple of years. I feel safe.
This community is unique because it's very racially, economically, and socially diverse. When people believe in the community, it really helps to build a trust and a partnership between the police department and the people that we serve. And they're reinvesting to make it a better place.
Partners are working together in new ways. They're securing resources together, they're communicating and sharing clients. So people in the neighborhood are really getting a wraparound of all the services that they need. I think what we've seen is that there's a greater sense of hope in this community, that people are feeling more invested and more excited about the future. They actually believe that tomorrow, even though it's been really hard here, will be better for them.
Great. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jordan Dubois, who is working at River's Edge Art Project, and Chief Thomas Carey, the Chief of the Woonsocket Police Department.
I got to tell you, I've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years, and I've been to a lot of different events, but this has to be the best one I've ever been to. I mean, it's terrific. Everybody agree with me on that? Just out of curiosity, does anybody have any partnerships with their local police departments? Some, not too many, but hopefully we might be able to give you some information that might help you out a little bit. Again, I think this symposium is a great opportunity for all of us. And again, I want to thank you for coming to our presentation today, and I hope there's some information we can share with you that might help improve your communities a little bit as well. Just a little bit about me and the Woonsocket Police Department. I was a native of Massachusetts. You can probably tell by the accent a little bit. And some told me I made the best decision by relocating to Florida back in 1982 with my family, and it was terrific, but some people think I'm crazy for coming back to New England. But after 26 years with the St. Petersburg Police Department down in Florida, I retired and came back up to New England to the cold, harsh winters once again, but to be the chief of police in Woonsocket, and it's been a great time. If you don't know Woonsocket, Woonsocket's located in the northern portion of the state. It's right on the Massachusetts border. We have 44,000 people compressed into 7.5 square miles, so instead of being spread out, we're pretty well elevated in Woonsocket. Its population, 80% white, 10% Hispanic, 4% African American, 4% Asian, and the remaining 2% some other ethnic background. The police department is authorized 101 officers, but you know, with every economy now, it's been very difficult, so the union gave up 10 positions just to save the city some money, so, you know, we're running a little short. You know, prior to my appointment, there was some problems with the top of the organization. In fact, the chief before me received a vote of no confidence and retired shortly thereafter. And the command staff had little input into the operation of the department, but I've changed that for them and the rest of the department as well. So I have regular staff meetings, and we have department committees where, you know, the rest of the people who are on the department can offer some input into the operation of the department. The other problem I faced since 2008 is I've lost 1/3 of 35 officers out of that 101 and 10, and it's been extremely challenging. Most of them left due to retirements, but there's been a few that left for some other reasons. And if you're not familiar with law enforcement, it takes about 4 months for somebody to go to the police academy, and then another 4 months to complete the field training program. So when I get a new hire, it really takes 8 months before they can function as a solo officer, so it makes it kind of challenging when you lose all those people and then you're trying to get people out on the street. But you know, even though I lost a lot of experience and knowledge with all those retirees, you know, one advantage to having new officers is to be able to train and develop them so they can have, you know, a community policing perspective, so they can engage the community and then provide quality service to the citizens of Woonsocket. The other problem the department has, it's never been accredited, and I'm sure, you know, you're pretty familiar with accreditation, especially with colleges. You want to go to an accredited college, and of course you want the best practices at the police department, so a lot of departments now are pursuing accreditation. But again, Woonsocket was never accredited, but we're on the start for that right now. As a result of our partnership with NeighborWorks and LISC, we will have department-wide community policing training. And again, I would like to thank Barbara Fields, Nancy Howard, and Lisa Belsky of LISC, and Ainsley Morriso, and you saw her picture up on the video, and she's the project manager for Sustainable Communities in Woonsocket, just for their support and the assistance to the police department. But at this point, again, I'd like to introduce Jordan Dubois, and he's with the River's Edge Art Project, and he'll explain a little bit of his background and the reason for him being here today. And I'd like to add, he's a very skilled and talented artist, and I've seen some sample of his work, and again, you saw that mural, so Jordan?
All right, I want to say thank you for coming, and thank you for having me, first of all. I'm 19 years old. I'm one of 5 with a single mother, and I'm the second youngest. I actually have a twin brother. I wanted to start off by saying that, I mean, without my mom, none of this would have been happening. She's kind of brought me into the world and opened a lot of doors and opportunities for me. But an unfortunate situation happened in my family, and which actually introduced me into River's Edge, which actually made me kind of open doors for me later on in my life, and actually help open doors for other people and opportunities. So what River's Edge is it's a nonprofit organization for the youth. I started there when I was 13. I'm 19 now, so I've been there for 6 years. I started off being a mentee, which is the lowest grade, at the age of 13. I mean, who could say they love to get paid for what they love to do? So, I mean, I'm still getting paid for what I love to do, but I've actually moved up in rank. So I started off as a mentee, which I actually had mentors, and the mentors actually would teach me art, because I've never painted a day in my life. And I mean, you kind of seen a little bit of my work. And that piece, the Biltmore, I don't know if anybody knows the Providence Biltmore Hotel. That painting I was working on actually got sold instantly when it got put up. So you can go down there. Thank you. Another thing that River's Edge does is you have to actually maintain a C average in order to stay at River's Edge. So if you guys have any kind of trouble with school, any kind of references, they're open to anything. And I mean, I've had trouble and I needed tutors in English, and they've supported me 100%. And I mean, I got accepted into some of the top colleges, which is RISD, which is Rhode Island School of Design, if anybody doesn't know, Art Institute of Boston, Mass Art, SMFA, which is School Museum of Fine Arts, and right now I'm actually attending CCRI to get my general studies done and transfer to RISD for my major. Another thing, going back towards the mentees and mentors, so well, like I was saying, I started off as a mentee at the age of 13. Around 14, 15, I ended up getting promoted to being a mentor. So I took the position of, because when you're 19, usually they help you get into college and you move on and get another job. Not my case, though. So while I was 15, I actually was a mentor, and I actually had to look after 5 or more people in a studio and teach them the knowledge that I've known, and I've actually learned from them. So everything I've learned, I've used against everybody, and anybody who needs to know anything about art, if I know an answer, I'll tell you. If I don't, I'll just send you to somebody else who might know the answer. And at the age of 17, I actually got promoted to the painting studio instructor's assistant. By the way, my brother is the painting studio instructor. I'm a full-time student at CCRI. I have a family, and I am married. What River's Edge has meant to me, it's kind of another family. I'm really open. I mean, the opportunities, for instance, LISC, and being invited to come to Washington. By the way, my ears are still popping. So, And I mean, and how I get started on murals, I mean, anybody gives me an idea that they want on a wall, I kind of sketch out more than one idea, and if you like more than one, I kind of piece them together. And River's Edge is kind of what started that for me, because I've always drawn, but I've never painted a day in my life. And now I can paint anybody who's sitting in the audience, just like. So I want to hand it back over to Chief Carey. Thank you.
You know, when I was in Florida on the police department, I was very involved with the community, and I'd never been to Woonsocket before, didn't know anybody. So what I tried to do is look to community organizations and to develop partnerships and find people to make friends with and try to do some things in Woonsocket to make it a little bit better for everybody. And one of those persons, again, was Ainsley Morisseau. And she invited me to participate in the strategic planning process for the quality of life plan for Woonsocket. And I got to tell you, you know, Ainsley's got a lot of energy, and she really can make things happen. She's done a great job in Woonsocket. But there were other community partners besides the police department. But the goal for my agency was to reduce crime through police-community partnerships. One objective for the plan was to complete Septet Training. You all heard of Septet? Crime prevention through environmental design. I had some experience with that in Florida, but nobody on my department really knew what it was, so you know, I reached out to Ainsley, and Ainsley through LISC was able to bring that training to Woonsocket. So I had some members of my department attend that. We had some city staff members. The chair of the zoning board, he attended too, and of course they got to approve all these plans, so it's good to have somebody from the zoning board, you know, that's got that Septet background. And again, citizens participated in the training. Again, you know, LISC and NeighborWorks were terrific, helping us put that training on for everybody. And we had that training last September. We kind of moved into the winter a little bit, so it kind of suspended some of the Septet activities. But now with the warmer weather coming to Rhode Island, we're planning to implement some of those projects, and I'll talk about one in just a minute. Another objective was the creation of the neighborhood partnership team, and again, we did it in that Constitutional Hill, Fairmont area. And again, we got people from the community, from NeighborWorks, city staff, myself, and all we did was walk the neighborhoods, identifying problems, recording those problems, and then trying to come up with some responses. So in this area, there's a park, Costa Park, and we came across Costa Park. It was horrible. I mean, it really, really needed a lot of maintenance. So after we met and talked about it, what needed to be done, I went to the mayor and the director of public works, and you know, we were able to get them to come out and clean up that park so the kids could enjoy it once again because it was that bad. We had a fellow by the name of Armin Burnett in minimum housing, and that's comparable to code enforcement, but he went on the walks with us too, and we looked at houses and saw code violations, so he'd make note of that, and once the walk was complete, he'd make contact with those owners and get those problems repaired and fixed. We also found, for whatever reason, there were stop signs missing at certain intersections. So again, I reached out to Public Works just to get those signs replaced. And of course, some of the residents start building those partnerships and friendships, and then they start telling you about criminal activity and traffic issues. So with some of that information, I pass that on to, you know, the appropriate division within the police department. But I think, you know, building those partnerships can really make things happen and get things done. You know, another issue that we had was graffiti vandalism. How about some of you? You have some of those issues in your community as well? Well, we got some ideas for you. So maybe we can help you out a little bit. But with the graffiti, the first step was, you know, a rapid response. So if there was a report of graffiti, the police department would go out and take a report. We'd get Public Works to come out, and if it was on public property, they'd either remove it or cover it up. But you know, what to do with private property. So we partnered with Lowe's Home Improvement Store and got some gift certificates. So then again, if the officer went out, took the report, we had a detective in our juvenile division that had those gift certificates, so he'd go out and make contact, you know, with the victim of that graffiti vandalism, give them that gift certificate, and they could use that to the purchase of materials to take care of the problem. So, you know, it was a good partnership with Lowe's. Writing that down? Just checking. But we came up with another program, Tip and Grip. And GRIP is an acronym for a Graffiti Reward Incentive Program. And we partnered with the Woonsocket Prevention Coalition. And this organization, you know, they try to address illegal drug activity, and they also try to deter youth from using alcohol and tobacco. And they sponsor a tip line for us at the police department. So we try to use the tip line to get this reward program going. And we offered $100, and someone could call in, and that tip had to lead to an arrest of someone that did the graffiti vandalism. They could give their name if they'd like. If not, we gave them a code number, and then we could make arrangements to pay them the $100 reward. And I could tell you, since we've been doing all these different programs, only one person has been eligible for the reward because we don't get that many incidents of graffiti now. So it's, you know, really helped. Another project that's underway is, again, it's to address that graffiti vandalism, and it's one of those Septet strategies that we were talking about. You know, we have another park in that Constitution Hill, Fairmont area, Dunn Park, and it's adjacent to a housing project. And for whatever reason, there's a wall that's pretty close to the project itself, and it's always targeted by vandals, you know, putting graffiti on it. And again, it's a public park, so what happens? Police have to come out and take a report. Then the police call Public Works. They have to come out, get their primer paint, and cover it up. So you start doing that over and over again, and it gets to be an expensive undertaking. So after speaking with city staff and NeighborWorks, a decision was made to paint a mural on that wall, and the hope is that we won't have that vandalism. And again, LISC and NeighborWorks stepped up to the plate, and they're help funding this project. And the River's Edge Art Project, which Jordan belongs to, you know, they're actually going to coordinate the painting of this mural. And again, Ainsley Morisseau has come back to see how we can do all these partnerships. I mean, it really is terrific. It makes a big difference. But Ainsley and her group from NeighborWorks, they're going to go out through the neighborhood and up into that housing project and get the youths that live in there to sign pledges that they won't vandalize that, and again, offer them the opportunity to participate in the painting of that mural so they have some ownership of it, and hopefully we'll protect it. That's what we're kind of hoping, and save the city some money and cut down our calls for service a little bit too. But what's been the impact of this and other efforts at the police department? Well, again, in addition to forming new partnerships and friends, we do have some performance measures on our website, and I just ask you to take a look at our website, www.woonsocketpolice.com. And again, these performance measures are updated monthly, and they include crime data and citizen calls for service. So just looking at 2010, property crime was down by 13%, which is a good thing. Overall crime was down 12%. But citizens' calls for service actually increased by 5%. But, you know, I just have some thoughts on that. Again, members of my department and I, we spend a great deal of time in the community. You know, since I've gotten to the police department, I've really tried to change the community's perception of the police department to one that's professional and community-minded. You know, we encourage people to call the police, and I really believe that as a result of our efforts, people feel more comfortable calling us to report crime. Again, the Woonsocket Police Department, we really owe a debt of gratitude to LISC, and again, especially to Barbara Fields, Nancy Howard, and Lisa Belsky, as well as Ainsley Morisseau. She's been a great partner for me. But again, if you have any questions, you would like to contact me, you know, my office number is area code 401-767-8829. And if I'm at my desk, I answer my phone, so call me if you need to. Again, if you want to write me, you know, my address is, you know, again, Chief Thomas S. Carey, the Woonsocket Police Department, 242 Clinton Street in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and my zip is 02895. And I got business cards up here if you'd like a business card after the presentation. I know we'll be available for questions. But again, thank you for coming today, and again, I hope we can give you a little information that'll help you.
I wanted to continue what Chief Carey was talking about the murals, and kind of give you guys an idea of what to expect in Woonsocket. Well, starting with that mural that you've seen in the video, the mural was to keep Woonsocket beautiful, and what it was I think there was 12 to 15 of us, and it was actually my first mural outside of the building. My first mural was done inside my vice principal's basement, which was pretty cool. So, and working with people who actually really experienced in art was a different. It was a different experience for me because I had to get them, first of all, in the mode to kind of want to paint and want to draw. So when I actually got them into the mode, it was like I couldn't get them to stop. They just kept going, and sooner or later, before the summer was over, I mean, the mural was done, and we wanted to do 2 of them within that summer, one across from the high school, but we didn't have time to. But the one we're actually going to be working on is the Dunn Park mural, and it's 100 feet by 10 feet high, I believe, which is a nice mural. So, and I'm not really sure exactly what I've seen parts of the design, I've distributed some of it, but I think I'm going to be in charge of it, but I don't really know the actual theme of the mural. Like, the one you've seen was Keep Woonsocket Beautiful, so I knew the theme of that because I was kind of the assistant again. And what we're planning to do with this mural is actually to get the community involved. So my plan is to have kids around the community instead of having young adults my age or anybody older or younger. We want everybody to come to it, and if you're willing to take a paintbrush and paint in the letter A's, I mean, I'm willing to help you. So what we're trying to accomplish is to have a bunch of people in that community come together, paint this mural, therefore everybody has a say in it, everybody can sign it, and it's everybody's piece of work rather than one person's piece of work. And I mean, I've never in my life seen anybody graffiti over a mural because it's kind of a disrespect in the art world, but and I mean, I think it's gonna work out because I mean, you're gonna have a bunch of little security guards running around saying, "Don't touch my mural," and I mean, there's nothing better than that. So, and people can grow up, and for instance, me, I can have my daughter paint with me, and I mean, it's gonna be a fun experience to get more than just myself and people who are experienced in art. And that's it. I have business cards up here, and if anybody's interested in seeing any kind of art, I can bring my laptop down and show you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan and Chief Carey. I think Jordan's inviting everyone to Woonsocket this summer. I know the chief makes it sound easy, but he said, oh, all we did was just walk the neighborhoods, but it was really his leadership in that police department that was formerly very closed that opened it up, and he took the time last summer and once a week walked the streets in a different section of the community, and it was almost like the Pied Piper. By the end of the summer, there were masses of people walking the streets with him. So thank you to Chief Carey for his leadership in opening his department up to these types of partnerships. We're going to switch now to Providence, and I'm going to do a little bit of overview and then turn it over to my colleagues Frank Shea and Dean Isabella. Oops, next. We already saw this. All right, so Olneyville, also a former mill village, and this one's on the Woonasquatucket River. Okay, so it's another W word. Put it in your list. The test is at the end. The Woonasquatucket runs through Providence, and this neighborhood is just over a half square mile and just under 6,000 in population. And similar to Woonsocket, we have a very strong immigrant community that's growing, and a higher than median, a lower than median income in the community. Again, there have been investments by LISC and many of our partners, other agencies, and the banks, again, surrounding the river. And United Way relocated into this neighborhood 4 years ago. There is a community park you'll hear more about, but other types of investments around the school, private investment in housing and affordable housing, and a river which has, I believe, the only urban fish ladder in the country installed by the United States Department of Agriculture. So we're very excited about that, how it's cleaned up our river. Frank Shea from Onlyville Housing.
Lieutenant Isabella and I are probably going to speak from here, if that's okay, as we go through this story.
Closer to you.
Can everyone hear okay in the back? Oh, okay. So we'll speak into the mic. Is that
go.
better? Great. Thank you. A little more about the neighborhood. It's kind of an old mill village, a lot like Woonsocket, dominated by mills lining the river, mills largely built in the 1860s, and for 150 years, kind of the story of Onlyville has been the same story. It's a place where people come when they first come to the country, get jobs in the mills, get their kind of act together in the new country, and then move on to other places. In the 1860s, it was people from Ireland and Italy. Around the turn of the century, it was Poland and Eastern Europe. Now it's largely a cross-section of Latin America and Central America, many different countries. Barbara had the language statistics. But there's a kind of a power in the fact that for 150 years, this is what this neighborhood has represented. Like a lot of neighborhoods like that in the Northeast, when a lot of the jobs moved out of the mills, it had a devastating effect on a neighborhood like this. And so it ends up being a neighborhood with lots of different, economic challenges that families are struggling with every day. Our organization is what we think of as a traditional CDC, which everybody in the room probably has a different definition of what that is, but it's resident-led community development and comprehensive community development. We have two business lines to do that work, which is real estate development and then asset and community building, which is a whole range of programs to help people in the neighborhood, get their, do better for their family in terms of their assets in their community, as well as feel better about the community and make connections. One of the hallmarks of the way we do our work is we're conveners. I think that's probably the thing that our organization does best, is we're good at bringing different people together, both inside the neighborhood and outside the neighborhood, to accomplish our goals. We're going to talk about kind of a story about some experience that we had with the Providence Police Department, Lieutenant Isabella, and a lot of other partners, and some projects that got accomplished because of this convening role. And hopefully it illustrates for you what the Sustainable Communities model means to us. Our story begins in 2002. We did a comprehensive planning process, and sometimes it's embarrassing. You do those processes and you learn something that should be as plain as the nose on your face. And what we learned through this planning process was one of our partners, the Woonsocket River Watershed Council, had been working for years to help this river become, again, a lifeblood for these communities. The river flows through these neighborhoods. It's kind of lined by mill buildings, which at that point were largely abandoned or underutilized, and it was, polluted and just not a safe place. They wanted to clean the river up and create recreational opportunities, but as importantly, they said this river was an economic generator for these neighborhoods for 150 years, and it needs to be again. So that was a big part of their vision. They had lobbied to get lots of cleaning activity. They're really creative in terms of bringing resources. Barbara mentioned the fish ladders, which are great opportunities to help the river get cleaner because the fish can go up to spawn or out to spawn. I'm a city kid, I'm not sure which, but wherever the fish are going is all I need to know. But now this year for the first time they'll be able to do that, which helps to make the river cleaner. They had also gotten commitments to build a bike path, which you can start out in downtown Providence and ride all throughout the state. And there was going to be a 9-acre park built in the middle of our neighborhood. I grew up in Jamaica Plain in Boston, right along the Southwest Corridor, and I saw the impact that a linear park had on the community that I grew up in, especially one that's kind of designed and built with the community involved in it. And so it was obvious through this planning process, wow, this is a really great opportunity. The other thing that we realized in the planning process, where the park is built is kind of, sorry to go through Barbara's head with that, would be right along here. But the area across the street was arguably the worst in Providence from a crime perspective. It was totally abandoned by everyone, even the police, which it was sort of like, leave that area alone. We don't need to really be down there. And the only reason that you would go down there is if you're interested in drugs and prostitution, quite frankly. So we realized that we're going to build this park, which is going to be fantastic and potentially transformative, but the area across the street is horrendous. So people who live kind of in the residential core up here are not going to be, they're not going to feel safe coming, and this potential investment is going to be wasted. The quote on there is Jessica Vega, the comparable person to Ainsley that Chief Carey talked about, who was told by her mother, you know, you never go down there because you'll get kidnapped and shot. So that was, you know, the area that we ended up focused on and the area that we had to get to work to improve. This is a before picture, thankfully, of what the area looked like. It had been a, you know, a 12-acre park that had a MIG mill complex that had burned to the ground in 1988. You know, tremendous brownfield was left behind, and this was a play site, you know, for the kids in the neighborhood who didn't listen to their mother when their mother said, don't go down there to play. Among the different activities that we did, you know, was some Septet training, which was really effective for us. We had about 40 people in the room for 2 days with an outside consultant that LISC was able to bring in with us. We had, you know, people from the neighborhood, our architects, you know, for housing we were contemplating, the Parks Department architects who were going to be designing the park, you know, police officers from beat cops all the way up to majors, you know, spending time thinking about how we were going to build this, how we were going to police this. One of my favorite outcomes of that experience was after spending a lot of time, we walked along the site, and one of the real problems we had was right there. There was like a void in between those two buildings. One building had burned. We have a lot of fires in the neighborhood, or used to. I'm sorry about that. And when the new building was built, they left a little cavity there that was the cave. And it was kind of a fully outfitted place for people who would buy drugs kind of in the woods next door to go and use the cave. And so this was kind of just a magnet. And Lieutenant Isabella's predecessor, who was along for the Septet training, we're walking along the site, and they were starting to do some of the remediation. So there's a guy with a backhoe, you know, working along the site, and along come 40 of us, kind of a motley collection. And you can see him kind of thinking about the cave, and he's thinking about the rock, and he's thinking about the front-end loader. And you see him run over to the front-end loader, and he hops up and talks to the guy for a minute. And next thing you know, the front-end loader is picking up the big rock and putting it in the mouth of the cave. And no grants were written, no federal funds were acquired, but we were able to solve the cave problem kind of day one, you know, in this process.
We don't know about any dead bodies in there. Next slide.
Sure.
So let me talk a little bit about the why this partnership is so important between the police and Owneyville Housing Corporation and LISC, because I think that you know, when the chief asked the question, how many are you involved in partnerships with police departments, surprisingly I didn't see more hands go up. And you know, redevelopment, especially redevelopment on this scale, doesn't necessarily equate to safe neighborhoods, and policing alone doesn't equate to safe neighborhoods. This is an obvious example of a problem that could not be tackled just by arresting people. Frank kind of misspoke when he said the police weren't down there. We were down there a disproportionate amount of time for the geographical area and for the amount of people that actually lived there. It really it took so many police services to kind of address some of the problems that were going on down there that it was a drain on our resources as a police department. So that has a lot of value when you're talking to potential police partners about how these strategies can really change the way that they police and what kind of value that brings to them as a police organization. So, you know, one of the things that that was done here also was getting the police involved at a very basic level with Septet training, starting that process. You know, Nancy Howard grabbed me by the hand and dragged me over to a Septet training, you know, and my lieutenant misled me at the time. I was a sergeant. He told me it was going to be overtime, so I'm thinking, hey, this is great. I'm there. I'm going to get some police training. This will be fantastic. And then somebody sprung on me that it was a design training. I'm like, design training? What the hell does that have to do with policing? Nothing, right? But then as we sat in that class and sat around with the people that were responsible for redeveloping this neighborhood, a light bulb went off in my head and said that, you know, if we can be involved at the beginning stages of this process of a redevelopment of a neighborhood and park that we are eventually going to have to police, that's a great thing. And that led to our commitment to this day to that program, but it also led to other relationships within this community. You know, we're involved with youth groups within this community, neighborhood organizations, other nonprofits, all from a simple Septet training that started that process off. So that's that's something to look at when you're looking at, redeveloping neighborhoods to create safe neighborhoods for people. Partnerships with the police department are essential. They should be priority one. Getting them on board early, getting them involved early, showing them the value of that partnership, and you'll see the value with some of the numbers that come up for police departments in regards to manpower and especially in this time of tough economics, what that can save cities and towns as far as public safety is concerned.
Some of the other outcomes from the Septet process, two very practical and specific ones that you can see here. Originally, the bike path was intended to be closer to the river, so kind of more down here. But obviously, with the street and the housing up here, it made a whole lot more sense to have a lot more eyes on it and things like that. So we were able to move the bike path, in a way that it was visible to more people at all times. The other more significant thing that happened was, and it ended up being kind of #1 on our priority list, the street that you see along here, that's a great illustration of it, had kind of disappeared in the park remediation. So it was supposed to exist, but when we went out to lay out houses, it turned out it didn't. And so we went to the city and said, gee, there's been some mistake, this street isn't here anymore. And it was like, well, we don't have the resources. This project was really complicated. They found every imaginable thing in the earth in designing the park and didn't really have the resources to continue this street. In the Septet process, you end up building an amount of trust with the police partners where the police, otherwise the street would have ended a little bit back here, and because of the grade differential, this street provides a great opportunity for the police in a car to see the whole 9-acre site. And the police said, if you think we're parking the car and getting out and walking around to see it, that's really not going to happen. But if this street is here, we'll be able to drive that street, in an 8-hour shift, we'll do it 4 or 5 times without any problem for the person on that post. So, as a CDC executive director, like 80% of my job is hitting people up for money, particularly the government. And so they're really good at saying no and saying, maybe next time. But when you come with the police with you, we had this comprehensive process that involved all these people, it ends up being a very different conversation, and it ends up, having a lot more weight. And, we studied this, and this is the most important thing that we need to do here. So that and a lot of calling and haranguing ended up with, $500,000 being found to continue to build that street in to really ensure that that community ended up being safe, that park area ended up being safe.
And that was really, as far as the police department is concerned, that was key. The Septet training and the partnerships gave us a voice at the table. It allowed us to really have input into the real development of this neighborhood, which made it much more policeable. Just moving that bike path closer to the road was huge in regards to making sure a police officer could go down there without having to drive down onto the bike path and really see that. Guys would park their cars up on Aleppo Street, do a report, have a cup of coffee, and that has a calming effect on a neighborhood, and it really makes people feel safe that are using that bike path. So, those are all key points for your organizations to stress to police departments in regards to how important it is to be involved in the process of redevelopment for neighborhoods. Because believe me, you're not going to police your way out of neighborhood problems like we had in Oneyville. And you're not going to develop your way out of them without help from the police departments.
And one of the other key ways that there was help was in site acquisition up front. In the area that we ended up developing, we had 3 problem properties that were, an absolute nightmare from a neighborhood point of view, and had been an absolute nightmare for a long, long time. This was the only house that had been standing on this whole street at the time, and the only reason you would live there was if you were involved in something illicit. And every cop that I've ever talked to in Providence has some story out of that big blue house, basically, of some horrible thing that had happened. So we really, it wouldn't have made sense for us to make the investment that we made there without having control of these three, you know, kind of very challenging properties. And at the time, there was a very aggressive nuisance task force that the police were key partners in that was very helpful in helping us to, you know, convince the existing property owners that they really, you know, weren't up to managing challenging property in a community like this.
You want me to show the after? Okay,
Sure.
the after one on this one.
So that's the orange or red house, I'm a little bit colorblind, is kind of precisely in the same spot as that blue house was previously, and this is a view out from the park. We ended up doing a 31-unit low-income housing tax credit project on one side, spine in the street, 20-unit home ownership development, kind of a, you know, in the same neighborhood adjacent to the park. We've since done 7 additional units in the same area to kind of build in the eyes and kind of, you know, build in a neighborhood infrastructure that supports the park and the park supports the housing. It's amazing how well they work in tandem and how successful they've been in tandem.
And just so you understand too, that partnership with Orneville Housing Corporation hasn't ended at Aleppo Street. There are several other areas in this neighborhood that we've identified as maybe Frank helping us out and maybe acquiring so we can change the what's going on at those houses, those particular houses, and that's been a very successful strategy for us as a police department to kind of really change the face of streets and neighborhoods without really wasting police resources to going back and forth there, you know, time after time after time to kind of address the problem with your standard police practices. So it's a strategy that works both ways.
And it's something that we've continued. One of the great learnings from the Septet training is not just about the built environment, but it's about how you use it. So we continue and are continuing to try to drive as much activity, resources, everything down to this park. The park gets amazing use, which is kind of phenomenal. I probably had very unrealistic expectations about what this could be, and it exceeded my expectations wildly. You know, we have summer concerts there with hundreds of people. Anytime you drive by, when it's above 40 degrees, there's kids playing on the swing set there. But it's been very intentional about how we've kept activity going there. We've had several playground builds that have been kind of partnerships with corporations in the area, with you know, different nonprofits in the area, kind of working together and driving people there. A couple of years ago, Providence hosted the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and Citizens Bank was working on a volunteer day. For the first time ever, all the mayors came and did a volunteer effort as part of the conference, and they came to Riverside Park and built out you know, this beautiful part of the playground. Don't worry, the mayors mostly shoveled mulch, so we wanted to make sure it was safe. But everybody came, and it was a great time. You know, the way it gets used now is kind of a phenomenal. This kid on the yellow shirt is kind of right where that pile of debris that you saw earlier is, kind of the exact spot. And the folks skiing are, there's a software company that's moved into one of the mill buildings nearby. You know, the Watershed Council had this vision that rediscovering this river would lead to a lot of investment in this neighborhood. And in the 3 miles between here and downtown, there is $100 million worth of investment in, you know, kind of the mid part of the last decade. Absolutely phenomenal. Lots of jobs, including this software company who used the park for skiing. The woman in the back was recently in the Providence Journal. They do a feature where people talk about their workout. And this woman said that she works out four seasons of the year in this park. And so when you think about this as kind of a software executive on that park, talking about it in the newspaper compared to what it used to be, it's an absolute phenomenal change.
This park is abutted on both sides by public housing, and last Friday we were very proud to be the recipient of only one of 12 Choice Neighborhood Awards that will go right into this community and build upon the work that we've been all doing together. I also think that Lieutenant Isabella forgot to mention that he grew up in this neighborhood, so he has lived through all the various changes over the course of time.
So I was going to get to that actually. if I could just take a moment to tell a little personal story, because I think it's really relevant. You know, you look at these pictures and you look at the graphs and you look at the numbers, and they don't really tell the story of the change that has occurred in this neighborhood for the people who live there, right? Every house you see is a life changed by this development. And I think that's what's important to remember. And that's what you folks do. You're giving people a chance. You know, I did grow up in this neighborhood. I was the youngest of 7, raised by a single mom, and we were dirt poor. This is a working poor neighborhood, and it was a tough neighborhood. A lot of crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of violence. And my mom worked 2 and 3 jobs to try to support us growing up. And I can remember her coming home from work. Her first job was a waitress, and she would come home getting ready to go to her second job as a waitress. And she would sit at the edge of the bed, and she would be afraid to take her shoes off because she was afraid her feet would swell up so much she couldn't get them back on in time to go to her second job. But that's not what bothered her. What bothered her was being at work and wondering, are my kids safe? Right? Living in that neighborhood. Are they okay? And she would often tell me, you know, I just want you guys to have a chance. And that's powerful. And the work that you guys do is giving people a chance. When you can give a parent the opportunity to live in a house that's clean, and for their kids to live in a neighborhood that's safe, to have a park that they can play in where they don't have to worry, that's life-changing. You are changing their lives. And believe me, that's what you need to remember when we're talking about partnerships, when we're talking about what LISC means to people. You are chance givers. You know, more than sustainable communities, you're giving people a chance at a life that they might not otherwise have. So please remember that when you see these pictures and you see these changes, everybody that lives in those houses, those affordable homes, and all those kids that play in those parks, they wouldn't have had that chance without the partnerships with LISC, Oneyville Housing, Providence Police Department, and the many other community service providers that are over there.
It's hard to follow on that, but we have a few numbers to show you to back up the very impassioned story that both Frank and Lieutenant Isabella tell. And I wanted to say to my LISC colleagues, when I first came to LISC, we always talked to the CDCs and asked them to get the architects involved early on in the projects. And now that's shifted, and we say you need to get the police involved early on. And when you have the leadership of people like Lieutenant Isabella and Chief Carey, you know why we're able to get that done in Rhode Island and are proud to share that story. So this is what's happened in the neighborhood we were just talking about. From 2002 to 2010, you see that we've been able to sustain almost 90% drop in calls for service in this targeted neighborhood, while the neighborhood had just under a 50% drop in calls for service. What does that mean if you're the mayor and you don't have much in the way of resources? That means that an area that comprises less than 8% of your neighborhood that used to take a quarter of your calls for service is now in line with the size of the area, and you can deploy your resources to other areas where they're needed. I think that our former mayor and now our congressman said it best when he said if he could take anybody anywhere in Providence, he would take them to Riverside Park because it would show the comprehensive nature of the approach in Providence to rebuilding neighborhoods. And now we'll end with a short video on Oneyville.
I think there's been a great improvement, a big change in the neighborhood. There's more involvement between the organizations, the community, and the police. I see them more now. And growing up, all I saw was a lot of the prostitutes and the gang members. And now it's changed. It's cleaned up a lot. The neighborhood's act is cleaned up.
Having been involved in this process of developing this neighborhood right from the beginning has really shown us that in order to be effective, to really change a neighborhood, you have to have relationships to do that. Relationships with organizations that are involved in the neighborhood and relationships with the people that live in the neighborhood.
It's been really great. It's been very positive. The community has been so welcoming. We have been funding, programs here in Oneyville for a long time, even before our move. So we've just committed to continue to do that, and especially in working with, the LISC project here in Oneyville. Everything has been positive. There has been absolutely no downside at all to us being here, and we feel like we're really making a difference.
Okay, we're going to open up now for questions, but I did want to recognize that in both of the videos you saw Jessica Vega in Olneyville and Ainsley Morrisseau in Woonsocket, and you heard them mention there are two sustainable communities leaders in the neighborhoods and have really been a major force in each of their respective communities. And if they're watching today, we give them a shout out, but we really appreciate their efforts in going out there every day and helping to build those partnerships. So again, a round of applause to the panel, and then we can open up for Q&A. So I know we're going to open up for questions. Do you want to come to the mic? Thank you. And identify yourself. Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm Tina Brooks from Massachusetts, the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I'm interested in the goals that you set for the two sites. It looked as if on the first one, there really was a target to deal with the graffiti problem in the area, but the second one seemed more broadly targeting street crime, but you didn't specifically talk about street crime and how it impacted what types of street crime. Could you just have some comment on that?
I'll just say something quickly and let each of them speak. But in each community, there's a broad-based agenda, and they didn't give us 3 hours on the agenda. But if you go in the back of the room, we have the community contracts, and each community had, I think, 5 or 6 focus areas, everything from affordable housing to linking people to job training possibilities to working with the youth and arts. And what we did today was just to highlight from each of those quality of life plans 2 areas that we thought were of particular note and attention, and which each of those link with working with the police in very different ways. But I don't know, Frank, who is one of the leaders of the effort in Olneyville.
And maybe out of the community planning process, the way that we did it, it was more than 150 one-on-one interviews with people in the community about, very simple, what works, what doesn't work, what could be improved, and what are you personally invested in improving upon. We ended up with 2,400 specific recommendations. They were grouped into the areas that Barbara described, and a set of kind of working committees set about then setting up specific goals and activities that would be outcomes of that. And one of the keys for getting into this contract, and it's very clearly a contract and not a plan, somebody within the group kind of claimed responsibility for being responsible for the outcome. So if, it's very easy to say, oh, this should happen, but if there's no one around the table who's going to say, this should happen, and I am or our organization is committed to making this happen, we find the items like that get in a plan, those are the plans that sit on a shelf. So the goal here is to make sure that it's kind of community-driven, community engaged, and kind of champion pushed as well.
Okay, don't be shy. I'm sure there's other questions out there. Ron, do you want to at least stand up so we can hear you?
I'm from Maine, Ron Phillips, but in terms of developing these partnerships with police departments, there's quite a bit of interaction that goes on at the community level, but in our state too. There's also this whole rural kind of perspective, which is a little bit different on how things happen. But I'm wondering, do the police departments have a New England-like association where you all get together as a trade group, so to speak, and then wouldn't that be an interesting way to bring the community development projects in Rhode Island and New England, into that wider forum to have this kind of discussion?
Well, one of the things we're doing with the Providence Police Department is we're actually going to be the first teaching police department in the country. So we'll take our best practices, bring in other police departments from around the country, and basically teach them what we're doing that works. And we're learning from them what their best practices are and work. And that's kind of, it's an education process about building these types of relationships with CDCs. Some cities and towns don't have CDCs with this capacity. So it's a matter of getting not only the police departments, but the people, say, in City Hall to start thinking about these types of relationships and how they can change problem neighborhoods. Because everything that we look at as a police department, obviously we're looking at through the lens of public safety. And I think that that's an extremely important concept to remember when you're talking to police departments and building these partnerships is that this is going to have a benefit for you as a public safety entity. It's going to reduce your crime. It's going to cause you to have to use less manpower in these areas. And these areas basically become self-policing. That's one of the most amazing things about Aleppo Street, is that we increased the population there tenfold and decreased the actual police presence there by 90%. You know, people police themselves when they feel they live in a good neighborhood. And that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate crime prevention strategy. And so I think that if you push that message out there, you can form these coalitions that you're talking about in cities and towns that don't actually have them, because it's a huge benefit to police departments to have these partnerships.
I think that that's something that Jordan talked about. You're going to have 1,000 people running around who painted that mural. But I wanted to just say that Frank and Lieutenant Isabella have actually been on the circuit, so to speak, in the policing world. And I know that Lieutenant Isabella is going to speak somewhere tomorrow and come back and join us for the gala. He's been in front of a lot of police departments, but maybe those of us in the community development world can begin to invite the police in to talk about these examples. And I think that would really be a great learning moment, because some police departments around the country have invited in this duo, and they travel around a lot. So we were lucky to nail the two of them down to come for these 2 days.
If I could just add.
But I know the chief wanted to say something short.
I'll just mention, too, that, you know, and I know all the New England states have it, but they have police chiefs associations. And, you know, there you get, you know, most police departments to participate, most chiefs. And, you know, I'll take one of my cards. I got some information. I can give it to you. But, you know, you can probably find them on the internet as well. You know, call them up, explain what you'd like to do. And you know, like the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, we have guest speakers. And, you know, if you have some support for that, you know, at your level, you know, reach out to the chiefs as well. Someone's going to take a start to get something done. And, you know, if you reach out to them, explain, you know, what you'd like to do, I'm sure you'd really get some support. And if I can help in any way, I'm always happy to. But, you know, take my card and give me a call.
In addition to the chief, and Ron, I know you sit on the National Board of LISC, but just last week, Chief Dean Esterman from the Providence Police Department joined the National Board of LISC as the first law enforcement official in 30 years. So I think hopefully we're opening a new era, and that he will, yes. We're very proud of that. He'll be here and joining us tomorrow night, but I'm hoping he can help open doors, and Chief Carey's willing to help. But I do think that in some of the policing world, the more the progressive end has opened up its doors some, it's still a ways to go. A long way to go. There are some over 3,000 police departments in this country, but we got to start somewhere, and we're glad to help with that effort.
Let me just say too that, you know, it begins at leadership. You know, that's what's going to drive this philosophy down into police departments to use it as a viable crime reduction and crime prevention strategy. So it's a great suggestion by the chief to reach out to chiefs in your area to kind of, because that's where it's going to start, and that's where it's going to be pushed down to the people who are going to, you know, work this strategy day in and day out.
And as the chief said, he had a lot of new recruits to the department, and it was an opportunity that he seized in order to introduce them into a different way of policing. So it does start slowly, where you have some new opportunities. Our opportunity opened in Providence with a new police chief. When Lieutenant Isabella's predecessors got promoted, Nancy and I were very nervous that the program was going to stop it. And there comes along Lieutenant Isabella, and he's been another fabulous partner for us. So we have been quite fortunate. But I know in Pawtucket, smaller city next to Providence, they just had a retirement and a new police chief. So we're trying to continue the effort. But it does take constant maintenance of the relationship.
And it's worked here for, just briefly, we've been through 3 lieutenants at, you know, a leadership level in our neighborhood, and we badmouth this guy so he won't get promoted. The truth. So,
no promotions for Lieutenant Isabella. Uh-oh, this is being live streamed. Sorry,
right? So, but when the first, you know, lieutenant got promoted, it was like the end of the world for us. It was like, oh my God, this is terrible, and you know, but this works not because they're good guys and they are nice to work with. This works because his job is easier because he works with us, and our job is easier because we have a good partner. So it's a lot. You know, they are good folks. We've been lucky in terms of the personal relationship we've been able to form, but it works because structurally it works and it makes sense in a community like ours.
Well, I think another way to look at it is the fastest way to promotion in the Providence Police Department is to be lieutenant in District 5.
But it's become a part of the culture of the Providence Police Department to work in a collaborative way. And that's the biggest change, and that's what Colonel Esserman has brought to the police department. You know, these partnerships, before he got here, were foreign to us. You know, we operated in a typical police fashion out on an island by ourselves, and he's really brought us to the forefront in regards to using partnerships to you know, further the police mission.
I know you've been waiting patiently.
It's all right. It's good discussion. I'm Robin Brown from the Newark office, and I had some questions about the community policing strategy. Was it for the entire city, or was it only for your sustainable communities, neighborhoods? Was it a pilot, or did it, you know, start through the whole city? And then what were the specific strategies involved, and did it come, was it like an MOU? Was it a contract? How exactly did that work? And then finally, who did your Septet training and your community policing training?
I'll start with the last. The Septet training was done by a retired police officer from Tampa, Florida, correct? But I'll let Dean and the chief speak to how this was done, but I know in Providence we had 9 districts, so.
Right. Well, you know, community policing has evolved, and, you know, what Colonel Esserman brought to the Providence Police Department was a new attitude about community policing. Everybody's a community police officer. You know, we redivided up the city. He put lieutenants in charge of each area as being basically their own chiefs in those areas. And he created an attitude of responsibility and accountability. And what that meant was that you were going to be held responsible for the good things that happen in your area and the bad things that happen in your area. And naturally what you did was you wanted to utilize all the assets at your disposal to make sure you were accomplishing the police mission. And one of the biggest was forming relationships. And those relationships are community policing. That's what it's all about. You can't be any more of a community police officer than one who's actually involved in the development of the neighborhood that you're policing. You know, you sit down with organizations that are involved in providing services for the community, but also from people from the community. We had a community meeting the other night, and I kind of joked to the major about it. It was the first community police meeting we ever had. You know, the council people were there, the mayors were there. There were absolutely no police issues, no police complaints.
He was treated like a hero. It was unbelievable. Thank you. It was great.
And the reason that happened is because we've developed, most of the people that were in the audience, I have a long-standing relationship with them through the work through Oneyville Housing Corporation, through the work through LISC, through the Oneyville Neighborhoods Association. So, you know, when you take on these strategies, community policing is no longer just one guy in an office that somebody gets to call and say, you're the community cop. Everybody becomes a community police officer. And the most effective strategy that you can have is to make the person in charge the community police officer, because then he's going to make sure that the guys underneath him are doing the same thing. So that's really, really important. You know, before Colonel Esserman got to the Providence Police Department, the higher up in rank you got, the less you did. Now it's the opposite. The more rank you get, the more you do. And that's a very important strategy to try to push onto police departments in order to make them successful and to really be able to push the police mission in the way that you should. I mean, part of the, one more thing quickly is the community contract that they're talking about. The most stunning thing to me as a police officer was 50% of the people didn't like the job the police were doing, 50% of them did, but they all wanted to know their cops. They all wanted to know who their cops were. They all wanted a police relationship. They all wanted a relationship with their police officers. Whether they hated us or loved us, they wanted to know who we were. They wanted us to feel like we were part of the community. So that's an important thing to know, you know, when you're planning a strategy for a police department and what you prioritize as being important to deal with the community.
One just quick answer. There's no MO, you know, there's not, this is kind of a mission-driven relationship that works. So it's not a, there's not an MOU, there's not a contract, there's not anything. There's just kind of an ongoing relationship. We've been able to make resources available that the police have used. The police have been able to make resources available that we've used. LISC has made resources available to support this that both of us have used. But it's amazing, you know, I hadn't thought of an MOU or a contract until you had asked the question, and it's just the way that we do business kind of, you know, inherently in the way we approach our work.
I think also it started, amazingly enough, with something as simple as Lieutenant Isabella and Frank Shea exchanging their cell phone numbers. So if Frank sees something in the community, he just calls Lieutenant Isabella directly. And that didn't take, as Frank said, a federal grant or a loan from LISC. It was just the relationship building. And it was as remarkable as a simple exchange of numbers that started.
And let me, I'm sorry, just one more quick thing, because I think it's relevant to LISC. That's what LISC did for us as a police department. They helped us build that relationship in all these relationships. And that's what really, really got the ball rolling. You know, they, like I said, Barbara took us by the hand and led us, Nancy took us by the hand and led us down that path. You know, Barbara works closely with the chief of police in regards to leadership roles, and that really is what LISC did for us. It helped us to really have a platform to develop these relationships. Sorry, Chief.
That's all right. I'll just mention, too, when I was in Florida, for my first 10 years, it was primarily being reactive. And we got a new chief in the early 1990s, and he came from California, and he came from a department that was fully engaged with community policing, and we transitioned over to that. And one lesson I learned, I think a lesson that everybody got today is, you know, you as LISC can't make that change by yourself. You know, and as Lieutenant Isabella mentioned, the police can't do it by themselves either. And I learned a long time ago, you have to form these partnerships to have success. And in Woonsocket today, we're just talking about, you know, one portion of what we're doing as a department in this Constitution Hill, Fairmont area, but we're trying to expand that, you know, throughout the entire community. I have community meetings throughout the city. You know, if you go on our website, you can email us directly. I tell people, I give my people my office number, my cell phone, and I answer my phone, and we're just trying to do what we can. I live in Woonsocket, so certainly I want a nice place to live, just like everybody else. And, you know, we're committed to making Woonsocket the best community in the state of Rhode Island.
Oh, I love that competition. I mean, one of the things that I have to say is that Chief Carey started a citizens review panel, and so there's some engagement. I'm not sure if I got the name exactly right, but he opened up the department and took participation. And in Providence, Chief Esserman, every Tuesday morning, he has his command staff meetings, and it's open, and he invites the public, and we attend that regularly, and there have been U.S. senators and local business people who show up and listen to how the police do business. It has been a remarkable sea change. I don't think you can mandate that to anyone, but as a suggestion, it really changed. But we also had to accept the invitation on our part and show up and be there and just listen. And they have then exchanged that by coming and hearing about the work we're doing and listening.
Lynette Lee from Oakland, California. You all have great stories. I'm just curious about the impact on the folks who were perpetuating the crimes and whether you were able to divert folks into some of the job training programs, or did that move elsewhere?
I'll just explain in Woonsocket, too. You know, one big issue is, you know, when people get out of prison, especially if they're a convicted felon, you know, it's a hard transition to come back into the community. And, you know, we've partnered up with probation and parole and other service providers. And when people do get out of prison, you know, we meet with all of them, talk about what services we can offer them. In fact, Family Resources, which is an organization in Woonsocket, they do bonding just to help people, you know, get back to work so they don't commit crime again and go back to jail. So, you know, we're very involved in that. In fact, we partner up again with probation and parole to do home visits, and I found that very successful in Florida. So if, you know, individuals are on parole or probation, you know, just that little support, you know, home visits just to make sure everybody's okay, can result in a lot of success.
Great. Thank you.
You know, we had very little displacement of crime due to the changeover on Aleppo Street. Actually, what happened was we increased the population there tenfold and decreased the crime, which is pretty amazing. Like I said, it's due to the neighborhood becoming more self-policing, but part of what we've done through, you know, learning the strategy of partnerships is develop partnerships with youth groups, the housing developments. We started a strategy in the housing developments, which are right around this neighborhood. We have 2 major housing developments in the neighborhood. We started a youth police initiative, which is a mentoring program for on-the-bubble kids in housing developments and housing projects. We co-sponsored the first after-school program for teens in the housing developments. And through that comprehensive strategy, we were able to lower juvenile crime in the Manton and Hartford housing development 70%, which is huge. We have opening up in my district now a reentry, one of the largest prisoner reentry programs in the state of Rhode Island. So we take a comprehensive approach to crime and what that means for communities, because, yeah, you know what? Half the guys I grew up with ended up in prison. And I know they're not bad guys. They just made bad choices. Some people are bad people, and they're going to go to prison for a long time. But you can't just throw somebody's life away because they made a mistake, 10 years ago or even 3 years ago. There has to be services in place to try to work with those folks and make them productive parts of the community, because they're going to be there. One of the biggest issues we had with the reentry program, it's in a residential neighborhood. And people are concerned, oh, what's going to happen to my neighborhood? But when we told them, most of the prisoner reentries in the state of Rhode Island are through Olneyville Square anyway, without services being provided to them, right. This strategy makes a lot more sense. That's why we as a police department are behind it. You give somebody a better chance coming out of prison or involved in criminal activity of being successful by helping them, So we try to look at it in a comprehensive way.
I think we have a multifaceted approach, as you said, and comprehensive. And one of our financial opportunity center is going to focus on ex-offender population. One of our biggest partners in Olneyville is the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, which has a street worker program. And they work in cooperation with the police department and Olneyville Housing together in trying to work with young people and diffuse some of the anger and the crime in the community. In one community in Pawtucket, we have a program working directly with women to try and get them to rebuild, to get off the streets and rebuild their lives. So it isn't any one piece, but a whole host. But as innovative and as fortunate as we are to have Chief Carey and Chief Esserman, we also have a terrific director at the Department of Corrections in Rhode Island, and he has really been a partner, and I think that's why Chief Carey can say they do home visits. They actually have probation officers working together with police officers. So in many ways, we have a confluence of some positives that is allowing us to do a series of different interventions. But I do want to say that Lieutenant Isabella takes this quite personally in the youth programming and working with the kids. And last year, he and his police officers personally put up their own money to send an additional 2 young people on a trip down to the Gulf region, where they had enough money to send 6 kids. We were able to send 8 young people down to do some volunteering in the Gulf region. So it's not just a professional commitment, but it really extends all the way to the young people through personal commitment as well of the police officers. So
that's what you've all said is a really important part of the story. So I'm just really happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there may be other questions, but I think that we've run out of time, and I really urge people to talk with my colleagues here over the next few days. But once again, thank you so much for coming, and thanks to the panelists.